whole debacle has been the gift that keeps on giving. But I'll tell you what, if there's one thing that I did pay attention to when I was sitting in class, Sigmund Freud was one bright motherfucker, boy, because that Freudian slip gets him every time. Yeah, because fraud is bad. They got to take care of my kids and we keep stealing. And does anyone else find it ironic that cat burglars are now breaking into learning centers and daycare centers and they just happen to be stealing, I don't know, center records, sign-in sheets for the children that are supposed to be there at the daycare learning center that they're getting funding from the federal government, you and I'll tell you what you do. When y'all get a chance, hop on the interwebs, right? Hop on the OL Googleizer and find out how many Somali nationals have been buying up property in Kenya. And find out what the Kenyan president now has decided to do with the Somali nationals that all of a sudden have all this extra disposable money to spend in their nation, because it's probably going to bring some heat. But you ask yourself this. The amount of money now that has been found to be fraudulent is in the billions. And before I actually close this out and send it back to the studio, I'm going to play a short clip from what a gentleman said all the way back in 2018 about this. They've been known about this. The whistle was blew in 2018, and guess what? It fell on deaf ears. So much so that the individual that blew the whistle gave up and said, fuck it, I quit. I'm not going to sit back and watch while the Democrats allow the Somalians to rob the American people, because he outright said, yo, this is way bigger than just Minnesota, because they're taking the money from the federal, not just in Minnesota, but the federal funds. That means everything that everybody's putting into, every terrorist attack, any investment. You have to remember something, right? The country's GDP, you know what? You can do your own due diligence, because I know a lot of people like to always say, no, you're wrong. And what I realized, when people tell you you're wrong, that means they've already made their mind up. And they're not going to listen to anything you have to say anyways. So this year, I'm taking on the mindset that from here on out, when I hear I'm wrong, I'm just going to shut the fuck up. But I'll continue to do this and lace it with receipts so that you too can find your way down the rabbit hole just as I did. But like I say before, and I'll say it again, if we want to get out of this shit, we voted our way into this, and now we're going to have to vote our way out of it. And instead of voting for the AOCs and the Byron Donaldsons, the same tethers who refuse to vote for reparations when our parents and our grandparents and our great-grandparents made sure that they had a free ride over here. When we already knew, I showed you in the last video in 1957, they already knew how they felt before they got here. They were never here to be allies because under color of law, they are white citizens. But yeah, it is what it is. So on that note, as I always say, remember, realize, and transparency forces accountability. Y'all keep your eyes to the stars, keep that head on a swivel, and remember, it's a dirty game.
When we did the Lillian Richardson case, that was in the news. She was on probation in Arkansas for a felony Medicaid fraud conviction. And she was running 50 different shell companies. By shell company, I mean a fraudulent, non-existent company up here in Minnesota, using her family members to extort, to use fraudulent means to extract money from the DHS Medicaid program. And that's in the newspaper. You can look at that. When we stopped counting the loss, it was 18 million. I know it was higher than that. A week after she was released from jail, I was told she was up and running again and started the same businesses and was collecting money from DHS, because the controls the checks and balances prevented them from shutting her down again. Barb Curran, look in the news. She's in Shakopee prison. She ran a $5 million organized crime ring from her prison cell using a state computer. I asked the state agency if I could have that computer so I could track the money, and they would not give me that computer. There was a way to find that money to get that $5 million back, but we never got that money back because we don't know where it went. Was it possible to find out? Absolutely, but I was prevented. Barb Curran is in the newspaper, and you can check that out. There's some other programs at DHS as well that I know of that where they teach people to train immigrants, where they teach them how to find a job. And most of those, the one recently that was in Hennepin County Court for a trial just a few months ago, he used the money to have a harem of females. He had 12 females, and that's how his lifestyle was. That's how he used the money he received for that program. Not all of it, but a good substantial part of it. The internal controls on these programs really need to be examined. I think, and I really appreciate you having me here today to talk about this, because I think, seriously, I do think that there's a national security implication. I think there are lives at stake. And if I could just take a story, every time there was a terrorist attack, Paris, San Bernardino, France, Paris, even the Syrian war, we would, as investigators, we would get together the day after the attack, and we would ponder amongst ourselves, how much Minnesota taxpayer dollars was being used to fund that war, that attack? What bought that gun? Where'd that money come from? Someone should be tracking that.
If y'all made it this far, do your man's Nap Turner a solid and drop Ain't Nothing New Under the Sun in the comments.